Thank you for all of your wonderful work in a broader sense. We know that our jurisdiction is commodities in the CFTC, but very much appreciate your efforts in this area.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Chairman Behnam, thank you for being here. I really appreciate your agency's leadership in the digital commodity space. As a member of this committee, I encourage congressional progress on digital commodities. The CFTC's continued partnership is essential to developing robust legislation. The decision of regulation between the SEC and the CFTC is an ongoing discussion in the digital asset space. In your testimony before this committee in September of 2022, you stated that the CFTC is the right regulator for the digital asset commodities market. Legislative efforts in the Senate and the House seek to determine pathways to bring crypto into the regulatory perimeter. Many of these efforts empower the CFTC to lead regulation of digital commodities. When Congress acts, is the CFTC prepared to take this regulatory role?
Thanks, Senator, for the question and your support. I'll answer that in two ways. First, in terms of experience and expertise, I can't think of another regulator, and you suggested this, that has been on the front line of crypto for the better part of 10 years, both from an enforcement side, and then we do have regulated futures contracts on Bitcoin and ETH. So we are familiar with the constituency, we're familiar with the market and its sort of ebbs and flows over the period of time. And then obviously from an enforcement standpoint, we've been a frontline regulator across the country and globally as well. Second part is, can we handle this? I often point to what the agency was able to accomplish after the financial crisis. And previously, before the financial crisis, you had the over-the-counter derivatives markets, more commonly known as the swaps market, moving into the jurisdiction of the CFTC. This is a multi-trillion-dollar global market that the CFTC, from 2010, when President Obama signed Dodd-Frank, through the course of a few years, was able to implement a global regulatory regime over the swaps market. So we've done it before. I think we can do it again. Many similarities between the two, and I think the agency's proven itself very capable in bringing in markets within the fold.
Can you tell us some of the risks of inaction in this space, and how could legislation be helpful to provide additional regulatory and jurisdictional clarity? And second, how does the CFTC coordinate with the SEC in regulation, registration, rulemaking, and enforcement in the current regulatory vacuum?
Thanks, Senator. On the inaction question, taking that first, the number one priority for me is customer protections, and I know that it is for you as well. But ultimately, if we don't take action, if Congress is not able to fill this gap, we're going to continue to see enforcement cases build. And ultimately, as I've said to some of your colleagues, we're always being reactive in our current posture. We're never able to regulate, register, and surveil markets like we traditionally do. We always have to react to customer complaints and tips. And the problem with that is the money is often gone and the fraud's already occurred. The other inaction, I think this is more for you, unless for me as a regulator, you've pointed this out on numerous occasions, there is a level of concern around regulatory certainty. There's a lot of entrepreneurs and innovators that are uncertain what the posture is going to be in the U.S. I serve as the vice chair of IOSCO, which is an international organization of securities commissions. We are behind at this point. We've been behind for a number of years from a U.S. perspective, and I've seen that happen over the course of 2 or 3 years as vice chair of the organization, and I think it's important that we fill this gap by moving ahead with our allies across the globe. In terms of coordination with the SEC, I would focus primarily on the coordination we have with the SEC from an enforcement perspective over the course of many years, including with the SEC, but also the Justice Department. We have brought cases together with them, both civil and criminal, and our enforcement teams work very closely because we do have a fair amount of overlap on the enforcement side. On the regulatory side, it's much more limited because, again, for the reason we're here today, we don't really have regulatory authority over the spot market. So there's no registration or these typical things that we would typically do with a financial market participant that I'm hoping that this Congress and this committee will work on.
Many of my colleagues are concerned with safety and stability of digital commodities and digital assets. How does the CFTC balance consumer safety when it comes to digital commodities while allowing innovation? And how could the core principles found in the Commodities Exchange Act be applied to crypto markets and potential legislation to encourage consumer protection and market integrity moving forward?
Thanks, Senator. Taking the second question first, the core principles, and I've said this a few times, are really a very efficient and robust and well-worn system. It's orderly and fair trading. It's making sure products are not readily susceptible to fraud and manipulation. System safeguards, which is cybersecurity and operational risk, making sure entities have appropriate financial resources. So off of these core principles, the agency then builds more prescriptive rules. So it's a good foundational system that's worked in all financial markets and one that I think would work in the crypto market as well. In terms of what the agency is doing to foster innovation, we have the Office of Technology Innovation, which I lead, and the director reports to me. We also have a number of advisory committees that have been very engaged with the industry, learning what they're doing, seeing and hearing what their challenges are, and to the extent possible, working with them to ensure that they have a sense of what our authority is, what we can and cannot do. But ultimately, again, as I said earlier, very limited in scope to just futures authority, which at this point is relatively small market to other derivatives. But this is why we're here, and I think if we can provide this authority, then we would certainly, to your point, do our best to engage with the industry and support innovation.
Thank you, Chairman Behnam.